Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Misha Kogan. My Sufi name is Raqib, and we are Nur Alima and I. We're gonna introduce ourselves first, but we are the leaders of the Inayat healing activity. And with this video, we're opening the first newsletter or traditional newsletter, which will now be the news podcast on a monthly basis. We will be inviting guests. We'll be covering important news and probably also giving you some practices. But for this first video, after Nolima introduces herself, we just kind of talk about our own dreams, our visions, our struggles. We'll talk about those too, don't worry. And sort of what we hope to achieve in the next 3 years, and also what you should expect from this podcast, as well as in general Inayat healing activity. So Nur Alima. Well, actually, before I hand it to you, I think we probably should tell our listeners a little bit about who we are, not just our names. So I'm a physician in a busy practice. I have 2 kids and wife, and my wife and I, Rafia, we lead Baraka Center in District of Columbia. So we have a couple of different hats in an IT activity. So our kids are teenagers, so we can't really fully dedicate it to this work exclusively. We have to take care of our family and our business. So we also have a holistic integrative center downtown DC that is affiliated with George Washington University, where I'm also associate professor of medicine. And Nur Alima, dear, this wouldn't be happening without you. So tell our listeners who you are.
Hello, my name is Nur Alima Smith, Kathy Smith, in my other life. I am a healer, and I was a technical person for many years and retired and became a full-time healer. I've worked with the Sufi healing order, which became the Inayat healing activity, for about 14 years. And during most of that time was on the former board, which is now an advisory committee with Raqib. That's how we learned that we see the healing activity very much in the same way. I got involved in this position because I thought that the skills that I had from my former life might be of assistance. I have had a lot of experience with merging departments, merging organizations, so that they make a new entity, as well as introducing people to new concepts. So, for example, we are introducing this podcast, trying to replace our newsletter, which is emailed. And I have a pretty good idea about how to go through that. I live in Syracuse, New York, in upstate, with my dog.
And I'm in DC, so we don't really, unfortunately, we don't spend time face to face, but we've been working.
We're on Zooming.
I feel like in this new norm of virtual reality that, well, we do have something that we do regularly together, which is we try to get up at 7 o'clock every morning and do some practices at the same time in different parts of the country, but simultaneously. I must admit to something to you. Quite often that 7 a.m. awakening is continuous with a brief meditation and continuous power nap, but such is my busy life. But the intent is there, that we have in the past couple of months, or more than a couple of months, I would say a year, because we started transitioning way before the 1st of January. And Devi and 2 of us have had regular meetings, so that we're learning practices and kind of more advanced teachings that would help us now to lead the healing activity. And so Nur Alima, you and I have extremely different styles of leadership, management, and working. So before we dwell into hard stuff, let's talk about the good stuff and easy stuff. And we're seemingly working really well together. It's kind of effortless almost, and in sync. We think often the same way. We don't tolerate BS and slow pace of multiple slow conversations. We sort of shine from that, and we just cut through the chase and go do things. That's sort of we both.
I think we're both very truthful.
Yeah, and
we don't play a lot of games. If you ask me a question, I'll tell you what I think.
We don't play games. We don't smooth corners. We don't necessarily make things very soft in certain situations. We may sometimes appear a little, what's the good way of putting it? Not harsh, but like
realistic, I like to think.
Quick to the chase kind of people. So
never intend to be unkind, but stick right to the facts. We're both data-driven people.
Yeah. I mean, I think listeners should know that in the past, leadership of each activity was very unique. In essence, each activity sometimes had, like Devi, for decades of leadership, and she basically had to manage her own finances. And for her, being the kafayat, and that's the spiritual leader of the healing activity term in Sufism, was basically her full time. Now, we can't do that, and that's also not where the Persia is taking the organization and where organization is heading, which is to make it more standardized with rotating leadership and volunteer positions, where a lot of support is provided from Astana, but it's very clear as to what can and cannot be done. And we definitely have room, and we will be talking to you about programming in upcoming months. But what the scope and the breadth of what David was doing will be definitely a bit less. So I want to start with this before we sort of go back into what do we want to do. You mentioned the word healer several times, which, and interestingly, those of you who were listening heard me not saying that. I didn't say that I'm a healer. Of course, I consider myself a healer, but in professional life, people often don't think of doctors as healers, which is unfortunate. It represents the current state of medical affairs. So we are bridging the kind of a healing territory, and Nur Alima, you've done a tremendous amount of work in palliative care, in helping souls to transition from this limited state to the immortality of the soul's existence. And I'm kind of responsible in my day-to-day life much more for a physical domain of things, and only some patients, very few, who would reach out to me because that's what they want my help for, to sort of address more soul-driven things. But so why'd you take this job? I mean, it's not a job really, it's a volunteer position, and it's a lot of work, and it's mostly administrative work. And let's start with you. Why did you decide to take this on?
Well, as you know, I said no the first 3 times.
I feel I harassed you long enough that you said.
I had to spend a great deal of time thinking about it and meditating about it and talking to you and to Davey. And I finally came to the conclusion that I was being called to it. I felt that I had a calling to do it. And we've only been doing this for 4 months, but I can't comprehend how people did it by themselves. I don't see how people survived. And I don't see how people who don't know each other and trust each other do this, because I depend a great deal on you and our conversations for feedback to decide where we're going to go and which direction. And as you said, luckily we agree on where we're going to head. So I don't know how people do it by themselves. I do think that there is.
I think that Devi was in a very unique position. I think she grew into her space over a long period of time. And we should ask her, Devi dear, in the first year of doing this, would you feel? I bet she's going to give a very different answer as how she felt in the last year of doing it. So
yes,
I think we're sort of underestimating the time that it takes for people holding this level of activity, holding this space to evolve to a kind of a more steady state.
Well, I'm glad you said that because my background is project management, so I understood what I was getting into, the assimilation of databases and the combination of newsletters and formats and so on and so forth. I understood what redoing the web page and those kinds of things. And I've been doing that kind of work for the healing activity for some time. So it was not a new thing to me, but I don't know how you're feeling, but I feel that there are so many people who need things from us and so many things that have to be time sensitive and taken care of right now. And I hope that this will stop as we go through, but I don't get to spend as much time being spiritual as I would like to.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. I was sort of thinking that we were signing on for much more of a spiritual holding space.
Yes.
We will not become purely project managers. And, and that's okay. I mean, I think it's my time to respond why I took this on. I probably thought about it for, I don't know, at least a year, if not 2 years. And finally, I think it was just combination of basically feeling that, our leadership, Baba Birzi, was looking for it. And also that I do bring certain skills to the table that could potentially prove very important in the sense of uniting kind of a more traditional side of medical world with healing, as you put it. And we're definitely going to, part of this podcast in the future, every month, we will start going into the terms and into understanding of what we mean by healing and what Sufi healing is. And, so that's in the future. But for now, I feel like, also notice the format. So that just the format, which was our newest idea, basically, because we're realizing that the world is changing, everything's changing and thus we're going to try to do things a bit different than the way it was done before, more efficient and more.
Would you mind spending a couple minutes sharing your vision for Sufi healing?
Yeah, I always felt that.
I think that would be good for people to know.
Yeah, sure. I always felt that our what we learn for ourselves in this order, what the practices we do, and the level of the depth we go in understanding the spirit of things and understanding how our souls are operating in this space and how our ego operates and how we live our life. And it always felt to me that there's a world at large out there that doesn't know about this, and that in the sense of medicine and healing, we have a lot to offer. And we kept this as a secret. And I don't think there was an intentionality to keep it as a secret. I don't think since Murshid brought the Sufism to the West, I don't think there was an intent to keep it closed. But at the same time, there was never an aggressive attempt at saying, look, the language and the depth here is such that we can convey it to general public and to field of medicine, and we can utilize skills that Sufi healers learn with the conjunction of the standard of care. And, there's been attempts in the past to do that, and they didn't work well. And I think simply because the time was not right, not because the people in the past were not doing something right. I think it was simply there was no timing for it. First, the mindfulness took over and kind of a more of a Buddhism, and then the yoga, and then the Islam was the beaten horse of terrorism, and nobody wanted to hear anything related to, when you say word Sufi, people were thinking of Islam, and then everything would shut down the conversation. And I think last few years there's been more and more acceptance and understanding that every spiritual tradition has a depth of healing practices in there. And I think there's not a lot of Sufi healing out there that is kind of going hand in hand with a standard of care, unless you're in places like Iran or Turkey, where it's a bit more common. So that's sort of my dream. My dream is to say, look, I learned the depth that helps me in my personal life, that helps me to stay healthy, and it forms my thought process as a clinician and as a patient, both. And I'd like to bring that to the general public and open it up beyond just 1,000 plus of our own students who are close followers of healing activity in my own order. I think that the scope of reach should be way above it. And I think that's also noticed that, again, I mentioned that already, noticed the media. We're trying to open this up, not in a newsletter that's going to reach few people, but we're just going to put it out there on a YouTube podcast and leave it out there for the world to see. And then on a bit more personal note, my main clinical interest is healthy aging, and I do also feel very profoundly that part of that healthy aging has to be healthy wisdom gathering, that our souls need to dictate the maturation of our minds, and I think that's one component in medicine that is basically completely non-existent. It's just nobody thinks that that for your health you have to deepen your understanding of the world, that for your health you have to grow your wisdom, and you have to grow your love in your heart. And if I would say these things to my colleagues at George Washington University, they will laugh at me. I mean, they're probably laughing at me anyway, since I'm a weird alternative guy. I'm sure that that's the way that everybody sees me. But at the same time, I don't speak to them about this, because I feel that the reality is such that is a profoundly taboo subject in medicine. And yet it's not a taboo, because there are situations where I talk to some colleagues that they totally get it. They completely understand what I just said. And they do see often illnesses that are originating somatically from the perspective that the patient's soul is suffering and it doesn't have a way forward. And the hardest conditions to treat. And you are the one of many healers who that's the level of your operandum. That's how you work. You work at that level all the time. I visit there, but you spend your entire career there. So anyway, I spoke for too long. Your turn. What's your dreams? What are you expecting?
Well, I think long ago we reached an understanding that I totally support that, and find it very exciting that we might be able to actually put that into practice, a combination of the East and the West, to try to find a way to help people. I also think in the next 3 years that we are both very interested in visiting the old concept of Raphaelite healing, which was hands-on healing and non-hands-on healing, but known specifically for the hands-on healing. And over the years, it has fallen. I think I'm the last person who was certified. But we have started to gather folks with like minds and to begin to have those discussions. What could we do to present it now in a way that reaches out to people more, that can be used more, that makes sense to people?
We even tried to come up with a working title for now. That working title, the touch of spirit on the body. Of course, we borrowed that from the famous Rumi poem, but that's the intent. The intent is to say that our teachings, our inner attunement, our state of awareness can be delivered as an energy channeling directly. And, I'm not trying to sound too esoteric here, but in some ways it is. And so Raphaelite healing was one way. We don't know if that's what will pertain forward, but we're definitely going to follow what's asking to be manifested here. We've heard from a lot of people over the past couple of years that people are looking for direct engagement in receiving the healing. And it doesn't have to necessarily mean that people are asking us to deliver the medical care. They're asking us to support their souls, and that can be done in a variety of different ways, but the most direct way is really through a human touch to touch, or maybe not, or maybe through the screen, but more direct, versus what we've been doing mostly in the past, which is offering the distant healing services like a prayer for someone and offering different classes to teach people different things. But we will try in the next 3 years to manifest something.
I'm glad you touched on that. As a segue, I'd like to tie this back to the newsletter, which is available. And if you have been asked to join the discourse list, please do so. You have to say yes before you can receive the mailings that used to just come as this is the new format for the old mailing lists and for the monthly newsletter to come to you. But this particular newsletter, which is the first that you and I have launched, we are spotlighting the wonderful survey that was done by three very devoted teachers, Satara, Isa, and Ushi Darena. They spent months and months interviewing, gathering information, collating information. And the most important thing that I have taken from it is that people want training. They want to see the continuation of healing conductor training and healing retreat training and healing conductor / Shirag training. So we're listening to those things.
And for time being, thank you for covering this. But for time being, we will be putting a lot of things, if not almost everything, on this YouTube channel. Please subscribe, because otherwise you may miss certain things. It's possible that in the future, Astana and the NIT will centralize all the YouTube channels. We don't know that, but for now, they don't have a capacity, and which is fine. We will handle it on our end. But we will make all these offerings available in the digital space at the one click, versus, again, the past of the newsletter and some of the past classes are staying on tapes and on the discs, and all those things are very outdated and a little hard to reach. So do expect that those senior teachers we mentioned, who are the advisory council, you'll definitely see most of them over time.
Yes,
and we'll you'll learn from them as well.
And wonderful Davy, who has held everything together for 24 years. She has been joined by some of the other highly respected teachers like Alia Yeager and Mahadia Khan, and are starting to try to mentor younger folks who are coming through in order to expand our roster of teachers. And in the newsletters, and hopefully through this podcast, we will be telling you about classes that are going to be offered. And also in the future, we'll be listing places where we know there are healing services during COVID. Well,
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Barak Center in Washington, D.C. I joined you there 3 years ago and just never left. But 3 years ago with COVID, we at one point had a service somewhere in the world every day so that people who needed healing and wanted to give names could find support. Now we've kind of stepped back a little bit from that, as most of the COVID emergency measures have. But we do still have a very large number of healing services that are available in multiple locations, and many of them are available on Zoom so that people can have a connection and a place to seek healing.
So I think it's a good place to talk about current offerings for a couple of minutes. You mentioned the healing circles and services that go around most days of the week, maybe not every day. So if anybody's interested in joining any of that, definitely. One way to communicate, the easy way, would be to continue. Actually, we will be posting every podcast on the Facebook in multiple places. We're also going to be obviously reading your comments here in YouTube. You can just put the comments in YouTube. We're probably not going to feature, at least in the beginning, this podcast unless it automatically gets featured on other platforms like Zoom, like Zencast and Spotify and all those things. We don't know if it's automatically going to end up there. If it does, that's fine, but we're not going to put effort into it. We're going to keep it lower key. But the other offerings, the annual retreat that's always in the third weekend of October, starting on Thursday, will continue. So we will have Pirzia this upcoming October with us. So definitely stay tuned. We will be introducing more of this topic of hands-on healing and more than
that will be October 19th to the 22nd.
Perfect. So stay tuned for that. In addition to essential healing practices, which are currently are monthly, I believe, on a, is it a second Saturday of every month? I can't remember right now. So in addition to that, we will probably begin to offer this podcast as a teaching tool in an increasing frequency potentially. There may be teachers that are our own healing activity advisory board, but we may also bring outside speakers for particular topics. Like I have no doubt that in an upcoming few months, we will do a sound healing with Ron Yuval and Richard Gold, and then maybe Tarana if she's willing to join. So we'll start also bringing other activities and other topics that we believe are of interest for you. And that's actually important. So do communicate with us. If there are particular things you're looking for related to the healing activity, of course, but doesn't have to be directly in that line. We can bring things, which is also seemingly a kind of a trend in our activity and our order to begin to broaden our scope of connections to other things and try to tie them together with our teachings.
Just a reminder about two very popular programs on every Wednesday at noon Eastern Time. Davy Tide and a group of very dedicated healers offer prayers for the world at noon at via the Astana. If you go to the Astana under programs, you'll see it listed there. We have every intention of continuing those for the foreseeable future. Many times, members of the Grandmothers of the Sacred We are some of the folks who are helping to host it and to keep the energies of the earth. Now, also, the Essential Healing Practices will have their retreat May 20th from 3 to 6. It's a retreat for this whole semester, this winter semester. And it will be held by Davy and Jamila, our dear friend from the Oceania. We do have plans to continue essential healing in the fall. So there will be a break over the summer, but we will be continuing to hold that. Oh, and did you mention that Pirzia will be joining us for the healing retreat?
I did, but
just thought I'd bring it up again.
Just bring it up. So, what are your, okay, let's talk about a little bit more so our listeners can understand us personally a little bit more. What are personal dreams and goals, and not necessarily related to our leadership position here in a healing activity, but just in general? Like what's, and let's keep it to 3-year goals, since that's a
you go ahead and answer that question.
Yeah, so I mean, I personally feel like the way I operate is a service. I am not necessarily someone who does hours and hours per day of different practices. I do strive to do something every day, but it's quite inconsistent and may not be kind of the mainstream outside of just a few basic, like a elemental breath. But I tend to believe that when I do serve with the intentionality of my heart in a way that I feel is consistent with teachings, this is what I do. And I hope in the next 3 years to learn to do it more seamlessly and with a deeper learning of practices themselves and how to tie this together, so that even if I'm in a busy clinic day, I still continue internal practice, so to speak. So some of the most transcendent experiences I've ever had were at work. They were when the patient in front of me, when I would feel the transformation occurring, when the healing occurring right in front of my eyes, and I connect to that and I learn from that, and it kind of becomes, in a way, my own waking too, not just for the person in front of me. So those are the moments I live for often, and those are the moments where I feel I grow the most. And I hope that in this position that will happen more. that's the first goal. And of course also it's very important for me to keep finding and refining the balance in life, because I'm not most structured person, and that's why you're here, I think, because you're a very structured person. I feel like everywhere I go in my life, there's a person who gives me structure, starting with my wife, and without it, I'll fall apart. But I point being here is that I do want to continuously making sure that every part of my activities in my life are balanced. Your turn.
Well, as a mystic, I no longer make plans very much. I continually apply. I'm surprised.
I want to be there soon.
Is where I end up. I've given up thinking, oh, in 3 years I'm going to be here, because none of my plans have ever turned out the way that I thought I would be. But I'm led to places which are marvelous. And for many years, I have worked with hospice clients and with veterans, particularly those with post-traumatic stress, using breath and meditation to assist people in wherever they are at the moment. Mm-hmm. And in some cases, it has led to healing for the veterans. And in some cases, with those in hospice, it's led them to, I hope, a smoother transition. And I am continually learning things from folks as they go through this, and they inspire me. The courage that they have to face each day. Each group has their own set of challenges. And I have no idea what else the beloved has for me in store, but I'm ready. I listen. I try to listen every day as I meditate to hear where I should be next.
So I think that's another.
Like you, I don't have a plan. But
you don't.
But my bag's
You have
packed. I'm ready to
grandkids.
go.
You have grandkids. You don't have a primary responsibility. It's a second. Um, one other, I think, reason why we're working out together so easily and seamlessly and good is that, we both see a lot of souls moving on a daily basis. I'm actually quadruple boarded, in addition to internal medicine and geriatrics and integrative medicine. I'm also boarded in palliative care. And, seeing someone suffering at the end and moving forward, it's a very humbling experience, because it reminds you on a daily basis that that's us too, quite soon, and a lot sooner than you want to think about it. And that's very humbling experience. I think it will dictate the way we lead and the way we operate and the way we teach, because at the end of the day, as you said exactly, I mean, I think I love Rumi, so I'll often revert back to him. Rumi said it this way: we have as much control as the cat in the bag, thrown above the head and swung like this. So that's how much control over the circumstance. So I'll put it that way. That's how I often feel, that somebody's grabbed me by the leg and swinging me above, and I'm like, what? Huh? I'm here. Okay, I'm here. So. But despite that, we will try to bring some structure to the madness and continue operating it as smooth.
4 years ago, did you think we'd be on a podcast? Discussing that? No, who knew we were going to be here? But this is where we're supposed to be. So,
and and it's also everybody keeps saying it's a silver lining of the COVID. I wonder if the COVID is a silver lining of the world, in that sense, is that we are at the point where transformation has to occur so rapidly, otherwise we'll perish from this place. And the divine is leading us faster and faster into the shifts and adapting to the new ways of doing business, easing into it in the understanding that nothing is easy, it's always hard, but also understanding that it's hard for the mind, but not for the soul. The soul is always there. The soul is always in the depth of an ocean, not moving completely still and fully aware of what's happening. It's just our minds are restless and chasing the tail. But this new way of doing business, I hope, honestly, will help us to be more relaxed, smoother, and more in the flow of the activity, in the flow of shifting the energy some, at least gradually at first, and then we'll see where it goes. And also very closely every step of the way listening to what Pirzia and the senior teachers and the leaders, the board of the Inayat are asking us to do.
Very much so.
We're coming to the end of our time. We will try to keep all the podcasts to under 45 minutes. We may occasionally go a little over in the cases where we have a very interesting speaker. But the goal, actually, ideal goal, is to really keep every conversation to 30 minutes. I've learned that from respect to everybody's time and attention span. Myself and my younger kid have mild to moderate attention deficit disorder. So if I can't do it, I can't ask anybody else to follow our chatting. So, but I hope this gave you all some sense of what you're up for. And I'm just gonna say that I hope that you stay in close touch with us. Do try to use new media. If you're interested in getting engaged, involved, communicate and let us know. And one of the best ways to help and to get engaged is to really spread the word and to share this podcast and whatever else we're going to be offering in the future on your social media. And with that, I'll pass to Nur Alima to give us the last couple of words, and then we'll close with a prayer.
Okay. I thank you for your time and the opportunity to talk a little bit about what Raqib and I see as the future and what we are trying to work toward. And I hope you'll join us on this journey. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll close us with a Khatum. O thou, who art the perfection of love, harmony, and beauty, the Lord of heaven and earth, open our hearts that we may hear thy voice, which constantly comes from within. Disclose to us thy divine light, which is hidden in our souls, that we may know and understand life better. Most merciful and compassionate God, give us thy great goodness. Teach us thy loving forgiveness. Raise us above the distinctions and differences which divide us. Send us the peace of thy divine spirit, and unite us all in thy perfect being. Thank you. We'll see you soon. Stay safe. Stay healthy.
See you next month. Thank you very much.